So, hi there. Today I'm going to be filming a Patches and Parley, which is not an idea made by me. It is mostly started by Ashton Daniel, a trans YouTuber who's really cool. I'll leave his link down below, but they make really cool videos about political commentary and just queer identity stuff. I always love rewatching their videos because they're very fun and really good to have as background sound, and their voice is really calming. But I really wanted to do something similar to that, mostly because I really like the style of the video. So Patches and Parley is you discuss something, and then while doing all that, you sew something onto your jacket. So this is one of my first battle jackets, and I'm still working on adding more to it. But I thought, why not do something similar? I asked my patrons if they wanted me to do something like that, and they said yes. So here I am. So again, this is not like a video idea that I made up personally. It was by Ashton Daniels. I didn't really ask permission if it's okay to replicate it. I think he said that it's alright if other people do, and if not, then I'll just figure out another fun way to do a commentary thing. But anyway, for today's topic, I wanted to talk about online queer discourse versus IRL queer spaces, and how those two kind of like intersect and sometimes conflict. So I guess for starters, my name is Mateo. A lot of people knew me as Pitsmits, but now I go as Moritos. If you hear lawn mowing outside, it's because that's my dad lawn mowing everyone's yard. But anyway, I'm I guess you could say a non-binary trans man. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm gay. I'm Mexican. I was born in the U.S., but my parents are from Mexico. And yeah, I've been online as a queer person since like forever. Probably since I had my first iPod in middle school, and I've been in IRL spaces also since then as a queer person, whether it's from GSA or meeting other queer people at school. And now I will be president of my queer club on campus here at my university. So yeah, so that's my jurisdiction over everything, so I can talk about this kind of stuff. Not to mention my presence online, especially on Tumblr, has been mostly about queer stuff, so this is kind of like my favorite thing to talk about. So anyway, I don't really know what patch to sew on for this one. I think I might go with this queer liberation, not rainbow capitalism, but I don't really know where to put it. So excuse me while I'm trying to find a spot. Or I might also do this True Trans So Rebel onto my arm right below the trans anarchy symbol. I think I'll do that. So I guess to start off with would be some examples of like discourse that I feel like is just very like chronically online. And by discourse, I don't mean like discussions of like queer identity that are like meaningful and productive. I mean like discussions that really don't feel like they go anywhere, or things that have already been solved within the community. So for example, I'm thinking mostly of like discourse that says that some trans people are taking up resources, or he, him, they, them lesbians, or bisexuals who are like in het relationships, or people who use neopronouns and stuff like that, just etc. and etc. These things I feel like are just chronically online takes because of the fact that they've been like disproven over and over again. I do feel like discourse does have its place within the queer community. It does sometimes generate meaningful discussion with other members of said community, except they're taken out of the IRL like context and history, which I feel like is not good at all. So I don't know, I feel like with most of these things, when they are being taken out of context, you see them as like discourse around slur reclamation. I feel like that kind of discourse lately has done nothing but generate separatism within the community. And what I mean by that is like saying that like some people cannot say or use certain words because it hasn't been used against them as, you know, part of like their identity. Even though most of the times I feel like when queer people are like hurled at with slurs, like it doesn't even have to be like a slur that's supposed to like represent their community. Like, I'm a gay man, no one's gonna call me fag. Well, people have called me fag, but I've gotten, you know, that doesn't mean that people who are trans gay men are more likely to also be called like dyke or whatever, or tranny, you know, that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean that like a gay trans man can't use the word dyke, whether or not to describe themselves, but more in general of like using that word. And I guess I kind of mean it like if a queer person identifies with a slur, I do this mostly with fag, or like, you know, with dyke, queer, tranny, transvestite, transsexual. I'm going to use that language to describe them if that's what they want. Do you know what I mean? So I don't intend to tell someone how to identify. If that's a word that they feel is who they are, representative of who they are, then fuck yeah, like all the more power to them. That's the whole point of language, to find something that feels like is a connection to you and your identity. So I'm not about to tell someone not to use that, you know, language to not describe them. If that's a word someone wants me to use for them, I will do that. And I feel like slurred discourse being like, but you're a gay man, you can't say the word dyke, kind of also negates a lot of the important history, which is another point. I feel like that, you know, this kind of discourse erases a lot of important historical connections of people that people have to these words and communities and movement, like the Fags for Dykes movement, which was started because butch lesbians and lesbians were taking care of gay men as they were dying during the AIDS epidemic. So I don't really like it when someone is like, don't use those words, because who knows what if the context of that is honoring that movement or honoring those people, you know? Okay. So I don't know. I feel like those are mostly the things that are like taken out of context. Those are just some examples. There's so many more. In general, I feel like IRL spaces don't really care what you call yourself or identify as. That was never the point. At least they don't care in the way that we don't think they do. It's not that they don't care like they diminish your identity. It's that they literally don't care. Like, they're not gonna gatekeep you if your name is like Socks. Do you know what I mean? Like, if your name is Socks, by the way, fuck yeah, I will give you a kiss on the head. There's just they don't care about this kind of stuff on IRL spaces. Like, kink at Pride discourse is also another example of just things that are just chronically online takes that lack a lot of nuance and also IRL context. And honestly, this one often uses like the straw man, whatever, to uphold like ignorant arguments, being like, oh, what if children are there? Oh, we're not consenting. Like, as if there aren't already things in place at Pride to ensure that whenever kink is there or leather, it is within like, you know, its own rules and its own areas. Not to mention, IRL Pride has always had spaces for kink and leather, and kink and leather has had a significant place within the community as a community of people to have helped queers during the HIV and AIDS crisis. So I don't know. I personally never went to Pride. I have yet to go to, but I did go to LGBTQ gala for a scholarship I won my freshman year of college. It was full of a lot of queers, and a lot of them were much older than me, like 20s, 30s, but some were like, you know, I guess you could call baby boomers. So it was diverse too. It was like a bunch of gay people, trans people, bisexuals, lesbians. Not only that, but also racially diverse. There were a lot of Latinos, black people. I did not see any Asian people though, which kind of blows now that I'm trying to remember it. I don't know, it was just really cool to be there. And while dancing with all these lesbians and gays, because I presented my speech and then we all ate. And then the whole point of the night was to raise money for more scholarship money So they had like a dance floor too. So at one point, me and my best friend went out and started dancing. But we were just dancing with all these gays and lesbians. And then one gay guy took off his blazer, and underneath his blazer was like full like leather harnesses. I didn't know that meant kink at the time, but in a way I kind of did, or at least I didn't really understand entirely. But like, was it inherently sexual? No, because we were just dancing to Lady Gaga, might I add. But I feel like we, as the people there, understood the context. And also, honestly, I thought he was dope as fuck. And also, side note from that night, there was like a drunk older lesbian who like came up to me, and I remember because I could smell like the wine and the champagne from her breath. She was like crying. She hugged me. She's like, "I can't believe we still have to go through this shit." When we were taught after my speech, when I was talking about how hard it was coming out. So I don't know. Maybe find some like older lesbians to have in your life, and maybe we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation. But I feel like in general, the problem often lies between online and IRL spaces with one, a lack of queer history, two, a lack of queer elders to guide us, and three, just the inability of queer youth to join queer spaces. So I guess to start off with the first point, with the lack of queer history, there's a lot that can kind of go into this. I guess just for starters, I feel like a lot of the discourse that we see online is just recycled like bigoted rhetoric used to demonize other parts of the community, like the whole King at Pride discourse and the idea that like some trans people are taking resources from other trans people. A lot of this discourse has already been solved or isn't even actual like discourse, like it's literally been disproven. Like Pride has their own 18 plus events, and there is no limit on HRT or surgeries for trans people. And even if there was, like, why do you get to decide who gets that shit? Also, not to mention that like butch lesbians and like he him lesbians and they them lesbians and non-binary people have been getting HRT and these surgeries that y'all folk so deem as, being taken away from true trans people. They've been getting these for decades now. So I don't know, maybe take it up with those people. And this lack of queer history education kind of stems from the two other points, which is the lack of queer elders. A lot of queer youth, I mean, probably most queer youth, who doesn't long for a mentor to look up to, And right now, for a lot of queer youth, and I mean like children to like young teenagers now, up till even my age, a lot of those mentors or like people that they look up to are like queer millennials or, around that age, like Lil Nas X or I don't know, Bretman Rock or India Moore, similar people like that, Kevin Abstract, I don't know. However, a lot of us lack, IRL queer elders who belong to like the generation where queer liberation in the U.S. was beginning with Stonewall and the first few prides. But also we lack this generation because they were all killed off during the HIV and AIDS crisis. And that wasn't an accident. That was entirely intentional. That was an intentional erasing of an entire group of peoples by that administration of the time. Why do you think gays hate Ronald Reagan? And it was a nationwide crisis that no one was paying attention to until it was actually affecting cishet couples. So we lost a literal generation of queers who kept ballroom, drag, queer culture, queer symbols, queer life, livelihood, history, education, all of that shit. We lost it. And they were the ones who were keeping it alive. And now there's this gap, And those who survived are often left with really traumatic memories of their family and friends dying. So, not to mention the crisis also caused a lot of elder people to go back into the closet out of safety, out of fear, so many other reasons. So, here we have a queer youth hoping to be apprenticed, but they have no one to teach them this rich history of, queer identity and queerness, because there are either very few of them out there who are willing to, or they're dead, which is just the sad reality of it, that we're living with this gap of culture and history. There's no generational transition that allowed like queer elders like 50 plus or so, in terms of age, to get into contact with queer youth, and like I said, like children and teenagers, because even then, queer millennials, so the people who queer youth are looking up to now, they were left just as much without mentors as we were. So here they have with this, immense pressure to be perfect by queer youth. So that also kind of goes hand in hand with like the inability to join IRL queer spaces. A lot of established queer spaces are bars or nightclubs, or they're paid groups, so you pay like your dues to be part of them, or they're just generally like adult queer spaces, which already presents itself as a problem too if we're trying to find spaces for queer youth within these spaces, because there is no space for them here. So we need to find a space for them that's safe for them in terms of it being meant for minors, and also safe for them in terms of that it being meant for queer people. So the only spaces for minors so far are GSAs, which are gay straight alliances, which can be kind of a turnoff for some queer people, or queer youth, I mean, because of the lack of intersectionality within them in the GSAs, or even just a lack of GSAs in the school or campus in general. Because let's not forget that many schools are just now getting their GSAs or still waiting to get them. And also, let's be honest, you can't even expect queer middle schoolers or high schoolers to be intersectional in the way that like is needed. They're literal children, and while they can do their very best, that's a lot of pressure to put onto some gay middle schoolers and high schoolers, to be intersectional and open to worldviews, especially when most of those worldviews and learning about queerness comes from Tumblr or Instagram. So can't really expect them. Do you see the cycle? So they're perpetuating chronically online takes and then taking them into IRL spaces. Anyway, also a lot of these spaces are meant to create social and safe spaces, so they're not exactly spaces of discourse in the first place. In my experience, there were some days in our LGBT groups where there would be some sort of like discoursey stuff, but it wasn't really discourse. It was more or less just queer 101 and just educating each other about our identities and our experiences and how they differ, and sharing information with each other. It really wasn't discourse. It's the closest thing you could call to it being discourse is when we were just doing like education of like pronouns and shit like that. But it was also a lot about educating with ourselves and our experiences in terms of like race or class or ability, sexuality, gender, like all these differences and how they kind of come up to make one person. So it was a lot of that too, and that is the meaningful and productive like conversations that sometimes is often lacking in online spaces, because you don't really see people face to face, so you're not exactly confronted with someone's specific marginalizations immediately. Not to mention, you're less likely to be a bigot to someone face to face than you are online if you're that type of person. So in general, it was always less of a discourse and more of a discussion, which I feel like is lacking in a lot of online spaces. And that isn't to say that we don't have discussions in online spaces, just that a lot of times it's kind of hard getting there. And I guess what also sucks is that a lot of questioning and queer people are afraid to go to GSAs because of the fear of being outed or the fear of being seen there, even if they try to hide it as like them being allies. Or they just don't feel like those specific spaces are going to be made with their interests in mind, because queer spaces can be just as racist, just as sexist, just as transphobic, just as ableist as any other community out there, and there's a lot to work on within even the queer community in those contexts. So some people might not even feel comfortable going to IRL spaces because of these reasons, and that's why they turn to online spaces. So I don't know. One of my biggest fears is that now that I am going to be helping run meetings as like the president of my campus's queer club, my biggest nightmare is that someone's gonna come in and be like a total asshole, and by what I mean by that is by taking chronically like online takes into the IRL space. I don't know. It's my biggest fear. I just don't want someone like a true scum or something, or someone who thinks like he and lesbians don't exist, to come into like my like space I'm gonna work so hard to cultivate, to be a safe space and to be open, and then kind of like ruin it. I don't have any problems with shutting shit down. I'm usually that friend people turn to for confrontation now, because ever since I started testosterone, I kind of love it a lot, which is hilarious. It's just a fear I still have, though. What am I gonna do in that context? Like I'm really gonna be, I'm really gonna be having to fucking work through that. Like that's what I really hope does not happen. I'm not saying that like Discourse doesn't have a place in like IRL spaces, because sometimes it does. Who knows? But like it just doesn't translate well. Like gatekeeping and infighting, like that's meant for people who can like block and like delete comments and stuff. I also feel like there needs to be a balance of discourse and our IRL spaces that acknowledges that this discourse is, has been made very real to us by being online, but also that we are in an IRL space like right now, and that discourse doesn't always have to be brought up at all. So I don't know. There's a small chance that, considering it's a small chance, because considering how small my campus is, that someone's gonna be like come into this queer space and be weird like that. But I don't know. It's a chance I'm willing to take, because people aren't generally that awful IRL, and I guess I'll just have to handle it on my own. So I don't know. But I do genuinely believe that people need to find our IRL spaces, or if they're unable to find a in-person community, to find support groups that meet online via Zoom or FaceTime or like Facebook call, whatever. As long as there's some like kind of like video chat feature, please go for it. Face-to-face interaction is crucial, especially now. I was in a transmasculine Zoom group a few months ago, like early pandemic, and I really liked it. The faces ranged there. I saw people who were white, black, brown, Latino, Asian, and not only that, like even though we were all like transmasculine, we all had very different identities and experiences according to who we were. So there were some trans guys there. There were some non-binary transmasculine people there. There were just trans masks in general, and it was just a valuable resource for someone who really couldn't get out of the house but still wanted to see people. And it got me out of my comfort zone of like listening to other experiences and seeing different types of transmasculine people. Like I saw some people who genuinely look cis, and then I saw some people who were non-binary like me, and no one questioned it at all. There was no questioning to each other's presentation or gender or pronouns or names or anything. Like it was just a space where we could talk and meet, and we could share valuable information about coming out, about surgeons, HRT, starting it, or just, having fun and like interacting with like-minded people within that space. And it felt really good, being able to share resources and information. So I really encourage anyone who's unable to find an IRL space to find one online that has that face-to-face interaction, because it's not just ideas you need to open yourself up to, it's faces too. So exposure therapy, you know what I'm saying? Again, I'm not saying that like discourse doesn't have a place in like IRL spaces. I just feel like it doesn't really translate well, and if anything is more to antagonize communities, because again, a lot of that is based upon rhetoric that's used to demonize other people within the community. So really not a great idea to be spreading that kind of rhetoric. Just, I don't know. This is like a real space. It's meant to generate community. And if you can't handle discourse not being about you or your specific identity for like 1 second, then maybe go find some other spaces to wreak havoc in. I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say before it starts raining. But yeah. My patrons suggested I start with this topic, so. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about this. My patrons suggested I start with this topic, so I don't know. Maybe I'll do another one soon. Now that it's raining, I should log off. So that's as far as I got done in the patch. I might finish it some other day because it's still got a bit to go, but hope everyone is having a good time. Yeah, hope you enjoyed my rambling. So thank you to all my patrons, and I'll see you guys next time.